Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something that feels like it was ripped right out of a sci-fi novel. We're looking at a Chinese robotics company called Ubtech, and their absolutely wild new creation, the UWorld U1. Now, this isn't your standard factory floor industrial machine. No, they're billing this as the world's very first full-size, mass-produced, ultra-bionic companion robot. It's a massive, game-changing leap for consumer robotics. And the idea of this kind of tech actually sitting in our living rooms, it's got some enormous implications. Ubtech's marketing campaign really hits the nail on the head regarding their ambitions. They promise a companion that is always focused on you and always loyal. That perfectly captures what they're trying to do here. They literally want to cure the modern global loneliness epidemic. It's kind of ironic, right? We live in this hyper-connected digital age, yet building real face-to-face relationships is getting harder and harder for so many people. So Ubtech is pitching the U1 not just as a cool gadget, but as an emotional anchor. Think about Blade Runner, Ex Machina, or AI artificial intelligence. For decades, Hollywood has been fantasizing about this exact future, a world where robots step in to provide perfect companionship and fill those empty voids in our lives. We've seen these stories bounce back and forth between total utopian dreams and, absolute dystopian nightmares. Well, with the launch of the U1 series, that fiction is creeping right into our everyday reality. But as we're going to see, bridging the gap between movie magic and actual real-world engineering, it's incredibly complex. Section 1. Grand Promises versus Reality. So how did those massive early promises hold up on launch day? In the beginning, Ubtech was hyping up a literal miracle machine. They said it could care for the elderly, play with your toddlers, clean the house, and get this, even walk your dog. But by the time it actually launched, well, they quietly dropped every single one of those physical assistance claims. Now it's focused purely on companionship and emotional support, which kind of makes you wonder, if you can't even push a broom, why are we spending millions of dollars to reinvent what a golden retriever already does perfectly well? Section 2. Under the silicone skin. Now let's put those downgraded capabilities aside for a second, because honestly, the physical engineering of these full-size ultra-bionic robots is pretty mind-blowing. Check out these stats. The male model stands 6 feet tall but tips the scales at just under 93 pounds. The female model is 5'4" and weighs a mere 77 pounds. They are incredibly light for their size. This gives them a very human-like, non-threatening physical footprint, which is absolutely crucial if you want people to actually feel comfortable hanging out with one in their living room. And to make sure it feels like a real person and not just a hunk of metal, Ubtech packed the E1 with an insane 88 servo joints. They claim this lets the robot replicate up to 90% of all human movements. But they definitely didn't stop there. They give it blinking eyes and wrapped it in this highly advanced silicone skin, literally complete with realistic pores and wrinkles. According to reports, it doesn't just look human, it actually feels remarkably like real skin to the touch. But here's the thing. If you're going to form a genuine emotional connection with a machine, it all comes down to nonverbal communication. So the U1 is designed to display 300 different micro-expressions. That means, theoretically, the robot can show these super subtle shifts in mood. A tiny smile, a furrowed brow, basically mimicking the exact kinds of microscopic facial cues that we humans rely on to build empathy with each other. Section 3. The awkward interaction problem. But, as you probably guessed, physical engineering is only half the battle. Once we start looking at the software and the actual conversations, we hit a massive, massive technological wall. Ubtech boasts about their advanced AI that reads your gaze, tone, and facial expressions, even claiming a lightning-fast speech-to-lip sync of 20 milliseconds. But the actual processing time, it creates these comically awkward conversations. During one of the company's own demos, a woman told the robot she was feeling depressed. Instead of offering immediate comfort, the robot just stared at her in total silence for tens of seconds before finally spitting out a rusty, super delayed response. Yeah, that kind of shatters the illusion of companionship right on the spot. And unfortunately, this disconnect carried right over to their physical launch event. UBTech showed off a few different tiers, the U1 Lite, the U1 Pro, and the U1 Ultra. But when these allegedly high-dynamic full-body models tried doing a little dance on stage, reports said their movements were just slow and unnatural. Instead of moving like fluid, lifelike companions, they looked more like giant human-sized dolls cautiously tiptoeing around the stage. Section 4. High Costs and Early Adopters. Okay, let's talk money, because the business side of this reveals a whole lot about who's actually buying this tech right now. The entry-level models start at a fairly steep $17,600, but they scale all the way up to a staggering $145,717. That is literally the price of a high-end luxury sports car, except you're paying it for a giant silicone companion. Needless to say, it takes a ton of capital to bring one of these things home. And that massive price tag gets even crazier when you factor in the technical limits. The robot's battery, it only lasts between 2 to 4 hours before it needs to be plugged back in. But here is the wild part. On launch day alone, UBTech still racked up 13,000 orders. That is a gigantic influx of cash for a highly expensive first-generation product with a battery life that barely outlasts a movie. But before we think everyone is rushing out to buy a robot best friend, here's the reality check on those numbers. Those 13,000 orders weren't really from lonely private consumers wanting a living room buddy. Nope, the vast majority of these initial purchases came from businesses, tech demonstration halls, and government procurement programs. So for now, this is definitely more of an institutional novelty than a widespread consumer staple. Section 5. The Loneliness Illusion. And that brings us to the deeper, somewhat philosophical takeaway of our explainer today. Beyond all the servos, the AI, and the silicone, we really have to ask what this technology means for us as a society. Look, even if the tech eventually catches up to the Hollywood dream, if the awkward pauses vanish and the movements become flawless, we still need to critically evaluate the core concept here. The whole allure of the yuan, as the source material points out, is the illusion of having someone who is always loyal and never argues. Sure, that sounds incredibly appealing if you're lonely, but an artificially agreeable companion completely removes the friction, the compromise, and the mutual growth that actually define authentic human relationships. So I want to leave you with this thought to ponder. Is this actually healthy for us? Think about it. If we get used to companions that cater to our every single whim with zero pushback, could these robots actually distort how we view human interaction? It's entirely possible that in our quest to cure loneliness with perfect, agreeable machines, we might end up making real, messy, beautiful human relationships even harder to build. Kind of a striking parallel to the tragic endings of the very sci-fi stories that inspired the UN to begin with, right? Anyway, thanks for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the future we're building.